of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call.
Mr. Smith?
Here.
Ms. Elcha?
Here.
Mr. Lindemann?
Here.
Mr. Ramos?
Here.
Mr. Breen?
Here. Members of the board, I'm going to adjust, make a switch on the agenda items. Because of the importance of the item and the participation that's anticipated, I'm going to move item F, which is discussion action on the approval of board contributions for health, et cetera, to number 1, and then I'm going to move A to F. All right? Public comments, and we don't have any actually for that, but we are going to have some individuals that want to participate with in the discussion regarding the health benefits. So it's better that they address the board at that time so that the board can have dialogue and interaction with those individuals rather than to do it at call to the public. So thank you, people, for understanding that and changing that to this item. So now we are on item A, which has become from F, discussion action on the approval of board contributions for health benefits for fiscal year 2025, 2026. And members of the board, as a review, very brief as possible, and to set the backdrop for what we're going to be doing here today. Everybody knows that over the past few years that we've been looking at an insidious movement with state finances and resources because of student enrollment and all those other things that I'm not going to get into because I'm sure that staff is going to address those. We knew this year that we had a problem with capital outlay, and as we extensively talked about at the last board meeting, that we're not going to transfer capital anymore, at least for 1 year, to break the cycle, so to speak, so that the auditor general, when he looks at it, it doesn't raise a red flag. So then we're looking at benefits. We're looking at staff benefits. We're looking at classified. We're looking at certified. In the analysis of the budget, we thought and we knew that it was going to be very difficult to do anything this year regarding benefits. We saw it coming. The thing that was going to be more significant was the fact that we didn't want to impact the employees with the one element that is so important, and that's the health insurance. We knew that, and we thought at the time that we couldn't cover the health insurance to the extent we did in prior years, and that the best avenue for us would be to look at different options. And in looking at those options, the only money that was available that staff recommended at the time was 301, much to the chagrin of certain people. They didn't like the fact that we were going to use 301 and include classified, as a matter of fact. So we looked at that, and we looked at a lot of options, which were presented by the staff to the board at the last board meeting. Since that time, the board has had an opportunity to look at all those different options, and staff as well, and to review, again, the most significant part, and that's the school and the budget revenues. When the staff met with the employees, there was a lot of input, there was a lot of conversation. Board members, you have told me that you had phone calls, some of you visited schools. We've all been informed and have received a lot of opinions regarding how the district should proceed in this matter. So where we are today is that we looked at all those options based on using 301 monies. The fact is that in the interim, while we were looking at all those different options, and which one we could proceed the best with, we looked first of all at the statute, which is 977, and we looked at the different subsections of what you can do with that money. And in the past, we've given all that money to the teachers. But we looked at the option number one and thought we'd take a percentage of that money apply it to the health insurance, and what was the remainder, we would distribute the staff as we had done in the past, but not in its entirety. Then, when we started looking at that, there became a problem. And the problem is very clearly identified in the statute, the word supplant. And it said that the district cannot supplant money for positions that are already in existence. And we knew that. They knew that, and we've known it because that's exactly the criteria that's used throughout the grant process. You can't do it in the grants either. So then we went down to support staff thinking that we'd be able to use money out of the M&O that we had paid for certain contracts and apply out of the 301 the support aspect that we thought would be allowable to do that. However, in looking into that, that is personnel as well, so you can't supplant there either. So we had a conundrum, and the staff, after all of us, me included, talking to the Auditor General, talking to legal counsel, talking to a lot of people that are in the know regarding school finances, the staff has arrived today, with a recommendation of 75% contribution by the district and 25 by the employee. Considering and knowing that this board has always done everything possible, and it's even tried to say it, but we've always said we want to do the best we can for our employees, and we've always stuck with that. And one of the reasons that we've had problems with the capital was because we continued to transfer money from the capital to the M&O for teacher and staff benefits and salary. So as of this morning, staff's recommendation was going to be 75-25. We got together again this morning. We made some phone calls. Mr. Soto, in the meantime, with his staff and Sonia, I met with them earlier this morning, and then we met later with Mrs. Samaniego, have really, really analyzed that budget. And I tell you that it's agonizing, that we didn't want to impact any out-of-pocket money suddenly to our employees that they never had to experience before. We may be prolonging the agony, but we still feel that we should do the best we can while we can again, and that's this coming year. We know that the future is gloomy. We know because of what I mentioned earlier and we're all aware of for the following year. But rather than to have such an impact on the employee, which they're paltry salaries anyway, we decided that we would look at, and the staff would look at, all of the resources of the district, all the funds, and whether or not it would impact and how it would impact if we used it or we went to another option, and not impact anything that has to do with reserves or anything that would give us our financial status would be compromised, and not raise a red flag with the Auditor General. So as of noon today, I'll say the latest, we have come up with, and the staff, I think, feels very comfortable. And the staff, thank you, and truthfully, they've been working on this thing night and day because they're feeling the impact and the commiserating with the employees. And the board, I know we've talked individually, and this is something that's paramount to us because it impacts our staff, and we have always wanted to do what we could for them. So we're going to come back, and I'm going to have Ms. Samaniego discuss, forget the 75-25, and we're looking at a 90-10 now. And you've got the figures in front of you, and Mr. Soto will discuss the financial health of the district, and then we're going to open it up to, before we open it up to public consumption, I want to let Mr. Soto and Ms. Samaniego make their presentation, and then we won't take any action until we hear from the interested parties, which may even persuade us to do something different, and possibly and maybe in the eyes of some other people, do something less. So with that, Ms. Samaniego, go ahead.
Well, I think Mr. Bahrain covered it all. This is my presentation. No. So thank you, Mr. Bahrain. Thank you, Board. We have been working extremely hard. And as I have informed the staff in an informational meeting or the work study session, things are changing by the minute, by the hour. And so as of last night at 7:45, when we left, the building and came to a 75-25, I still did not feel comfortable. And so this morning at 7, I had a meeting with Mrs. Barcelo, and then without my knowledge, Mr. Bahrain was having a meeting with Cesar right at that time. And so in looking at other options, because the 75-25 was going to severely impact our employees, especially our classified staff. And as I gave you different scenarios last time, an employee making under $20,000 at a 75-25 was probably not going to afford insurance. And so that to me was disheartening, and so I had to go back to the drawing board as of this morning. So I apologize that your 75-25 is not what I'm going to provide today as a recommendation. However, after discussing it with Ms. Barcelo, with Mr. Soto, with Mrs. Cox, and of course, Mr. Bahrain, who's been very involved in the discussions, we think we've found a best possible solution for our employees, for our budget, and I am committed to always doing what's best for all employees, not just a certain group. Clarification, the 301 monies was something that, we were looking at, and in consultation with various legal finance advisors in the state, legal counsel, our intention was not to use it towards insurance because we can't. 301 Classroom Site Fund can be used for 7 reasons. Class size reduction, teacher compensation, including base pay, performance pay, assessment intervention programs, such as tutoring, summer school, that can be paid out of Classroom Site Fund, teacher development, dropout prevention programs, teacher liability insurance premiums, and student support services. So the idea that it could help offset the insurance cost was under the liability premiums, but teacher liability is something else, it's not insurance. So then we went towards the teacher compensation. And as Mr. Bahrain says, without extending the whole dialogue, is that we cannot use it because of supplanting. So teacher salaries are already in the M&O budget. Teacher salaries cannot be now brought over to the 301. But there's things we could do with 301 that I'm not going to discuss today because that is a conversation for the future. Because in the last 3 days, I myself have learned extensively a lot of information on the 301. What it can do, what it can't do, and what other districts are doing, because times are tough and we've got to start thinking and being innovative in what we do with our school budgets. And that is one of the budgets, but that is not for today. So with that being said, in the best case scenario for DUSD, not impacting the budget and really not impacting our employees drastically, my recommendation, considering all the budget concerns we have, staff feedback, we did survey the staff as Mr. Lindeman asked, the budget cuts necessary for next fiscal year, the loss of enrollment, the carryover, the capital transfer, all of those factors come into play. My recommendation, after considering as of 7 this morning, another option is to have the district pay for a 90% contribution towards the insurance, and the employee pay a 10% on the silver plan, which does have a $500 deductible for the employee only and a $1,000 family deductible. A co-insurance percentage is also part of this plan. A co-insurance means that the employee will pay an additional amount towards their medical cost. I'm going to give you one example. If you have $1,000 in medical expenses towards after meeting your $500 deductible, the employee will pay 15% of the remaining $500 that they pay towards. For example, 15% of $500 equals $75. So in that scenario, Your insurance will cover the remaining 425. So if our employees, once the board makes their decision on my recommendation, if an employee chooses to stay within the silver plan with the $500 deductible, there is a copay factor. In the, our employees will still be able to purchase the copay gold, the classic gold and the copay gold. And the copay gold does not have a percentage coinsurance factor. If and when, if we go with this recommendation, and the board supports my recommendation, then we are going to have Blue Cross Blue Shield here to really go through all of these different plans and different factors during the open enrollment period so that our employees can make the best decision as far as their health insurance is concerned. So what does it mean as a 90-10? So the proposal is to offer all employees a classic silver plan with a board contribution of 90% for employee-only benefit. That is a contribution of $558.23, and an employee contribution of 10% for a cost of $62.03 per month, for a total annual board contribution of $6,698.81 for employee only, and an annual employee contribution of $744.31. Employees may choose to purchase a different plan, such as a classic gold or copay gold, as I said, and that would be an additional cost to them, as it is now anyway, if you purchase that. This plan will allow us to do what we need to do. It will allow our employees to keep insurance, at least as we know, insurance is going to take a big increase next year. So that'll at least give us this year for our employees to keep a healthy insurance plan with a smaller contribution compared to the 75-25 option that was going to be really detrimental to their financial needs or as a family. As far as a cost savings to the district, this is not going to impact, it's a cost savings to the district because we're looking at other funds to offset some of this cost. And we are confident that in our proposal and in the funding that we looked at, we can support this for this year. And Mr. Soto is foreseeing no transfer of capital. We're able to keep our insurance. Teachers are able to keep their 301. And this is the best possible proposal that benefits all of employees and keeps the district in a healthy position as far as our budget is concerned. We do want to show, just for knowledge purposes, Mr. Durazo, can you please show, we want to just show this for our, this mainly for the board or for our staff. Because the board contribution would be towards the classic silver plan, we want to show you, because employees, this is what our employees were asking. Well, how much will I have to pay if I have employee plus children? How much will I have to pay if it's family? And I couldn't provide that at the day of Monday's meeting because I didn't know what the board contribution was going to be. So if the proposed 90-10, I'm going to focus on, and I have Alma's permission to use. Alma currently, Ms. Valenzuela, has insurance under the employee plus children. So it's the first, second, third column. If you look at employee plus children, the monthly premium under the classic silver plan is $1,054.44. This current year, just to give you an idea, the employee plus family was the annual the monthly premium was around, on a 26 deduction pay, it was $457.83. That's not on here, okay? But I'm just putting those numbers. So Ms. Alma Valenzuela was having to pay $457.83 per paycheck towards her employee family benefits. So with this board contribution, what I want you to focus on, employees and board, is the employee payroll contribution, where it has the 21 deductions versus the 26. So the impact to Ms. Valenzuela for this year, she was paying, again, I said, $457.83. And you, am I right, Alma? And you were,
It was on a different plan, though.
you were on a different plan, yes. So now, for Alma, she will have to pay $452.31. She was on a different plan. For an employee plus children, the monthly premium would be $1,054.44 with a 21 or a 26 deduction for $229.02 per pay period. For an employee plus spouse, you're looking at a monthly premium of $1,184.69 with a 26 deduction pay, that's $289.13. For the employee only, which is what the board contributes to, an employee only monthly premium would be $620.26 for a 21 deduction of $35.44 or a $26 deduction, a 26 pay deduction of $28.63. Comparing to the 75-25 that we were looking at, and I'm just gonna give you a perspective of what that was gonna look like. Under the silver plan, under the employee only, under the classic employee plus spouse, it was gonna be, under a 26 pay, it was gonna be, it was $192.31. This is this year currently. So there is a jump in what our employees are going to have to pay, and a little bit of an increase, but it's not as detrimental if we had gone with the 75-25, because that would have been 75% contribution from the board, 25% contribution from the staff. Are those the only two areas, Mr. Durazo, that are, yes? So this gives our employees an idea. 21 pays, 26 pays for any of the plans or any of the enrollment, so dual employee, family, employee, children, employee, spouse, and employee. So the board contribution, again, would be $558.23 per month. Mr. Soto, do you have anything to add on that part?
Well, before you do, we'll get a motion on the floor after we hear from them so that we can have board discussion, but I don't want to get that motion until after we hear from the constituents what they have to say, because it could be significant in your minds of what they have to say. So we'll give them that opportunity. So go ahead, Mr. Soto.
I just wanted to add to what Mrs. Amaneo was saying in terms of health insurance. Of course, the open enrollment is going to be during the month of May, but we won't know how many employees will go up to the copay gold. But I'm assuming that everybody's going to be placed on this plan to begin with, and then once they come see Nidia or they do the open enrollment, then they'll be able to see what the cost will be to go up to the copay gold plan. So again, we're just giving the example in the Classic Silver, but once the open enrollment kicks in, and we will have those specific amounts for the employees that want to know how much it will cost me, to keep what we currently have, which is the majority of the employees have the copay gold, of course, because the board was paying for that contribution. I can just tell you unofficially, also as an employee, that it will be much better to pay to go up to the copay gold plan than trying to pay 15 or 20% of coinsurance and a $500 or $1,000 deductible. But again, that's just as a personal opinion or recommendation to the employees. But again, I just wanted to clarify that.
Well, I also want you to address for the board, because it's so important that the board know that whatever recommendation you're making regarding those numbers and regarding the resources that you're going to tap,
Correct.
that in doing this for next year, that there is going to be, number one, there is going to be a general fund reserve.
Correct.
And there's going to be definitely capital, unless
Yes.
you need it for immediate projects or anything that is done routinely. And then the other thing is that the budget reserve is also gonna be fine. Let's just say you have a rainy day balance there
Correct.
for whatever. All right. Is there anything you wanted to add regarding personnel or staffing? I know we're gonna get to that in a minute, but regarding how we got to this number, your big issue is enrollment.
Yes, and so we have to always remember, and we talk about enrollment every month, but we have two different numbers that we see. So we see enrollment, which is every single student, pre-K through 12, and then we have our ADM. So our ADM numbers are what drives our budget. And so we keep seeing a decrease, and that's going to cause the M&O budget to decrease. And so we have to be very cognizant that if it continues to decrease, our money, our budget is going to have to decrease. And then we'll have to make recommendations based on wherever we're at that time.
Could that prompt a budget revision for you?
Definitely.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, but even if there were a budget revision, unless the numbers were just outlandish,
Correct.
you still could
Cover.
maintain it. That's important for the board to know.
Yes.
That's very important.
And I think that the important factor that comes into play with that is if and when, let's say we start the year and our enrollment is 60 students less than what we are now, the recommendations I'm making as explained to you during the work study session on not hiring some of these vacancies that we have is based on what we have now. But if the enrollment continues to take a dive, and here we are in August, and I have classrooms with 13 students, I, at that point, will have to come back to the board and say, I'm not gonna wait till May, we've gotta do something now. So I want you to keep that in the back of your mind.
And on that term, also will be the health insurance. Always remember that this is what we're doing for this year. As we've said in previous meetings, the utilization and the claims are big, and the projected increase was gonna be 30 to 40%. But the reason why it's only 9% is because we had a cap. Next year, we're gonna go and do an RFP, which is a request for proposal for different vendors, different plans that will impact, of course, employees at that time in terms of, coverage, in terms of physicians, in terms of all that, not as rich plans. But again, that's something that we will have to be looking at for the following year, not this coming year.
Okay, anything else from the staff? All right, so it's important then that board members will get into deliberation as soon as we hear from people that want to address the item on the agenda. So we're going to start with Martha Alonso, and she's representing the DEA.
Good evening, Mr. President, members of the board, Superintendent Samaniego, and members of the public. My name is Martha Alonso, and I'm here to represent Douglas Educators Association as their president, speaking on action item A, and would like to let you know that DEA represents more than the majority of the district employees at the current time. First, I want to ask you a question. Do you as board members feel you have been provided all necessary information and various options to make an informed decision? DEA officers believe the information provided has been inconsistent and many avenues remain unexplored. We received a presentation on Thursday morning, but by the afternoon, the version presented was different. The information sent to staff along with the survey was later changed, and by Monday's staff meeting, yet another version was introduced. Initially, 5 solutions were considered, then 4, and finally only 3 were sent out to the staff. The ongoing flux of information has created uncertainty and widespread concerns across the district. Furthermore, the presentation failed to clarify whether positions were being cut due to resignations and retirements, or if employees were losing their jobs outright. The lack of transparency has caused unnecessary panic among the staff and the community. Given these inconsistencies and shifting the financial targets, we question whether there is enough concrete information for the board to make a fully informed decision on these proposed cuts today. Additional solutions must be considered before any final decisions are made. There are ways to meet the $2 million in necessary reductions while ensuring more equitable distribution of the impact. To illustrate these options, we have prepared a handout detailed alternative solutions. Madam President will now distribute these copies to the board and make them available to the public if they like. I do want to state that, of course, the email was sent out at 3:37, so we were not aware of the staff's decision to not include 301 funds. So those are still included in our propositions. So, I would like to draw your attention to the left side, and you will find an overview of the Classic Silver Plan, including employee costs for individuals and family coverage. The second table underneath outlines possible employee costs under different insurance contribution splits, ranging from the 75-25, which was initially proposed, to our proposal, which was a 95-5 split. This breakdown highlights how insurance deductions would affect employees based on their contract length, whether they're 12, 11, 9, or 10-month employees. One major concern of the proposed use of the 301 funds to help offset district costs. As you are aware now, of course, these funds cannot be allocated for insurance, which is why the district is instead proposing the use for salaries, which I know now they have removed. But the table below on the left side did include the loss of income for 301 certified staff would experience if monies were used. In addition, of course, to the cost of insurance that they would have to pay depending on the split. Now on the right side, we would like to present to you some alternative solutions. The first column details the district's proposed cuts under option 2, which totaled $2.5 million in savings, exceeding the stated amount of $2 million at the meeting we had with the staff. This discrepancy raised another concern for us that the necessity of such deep reductions was not clear. In response, we developed solutions aligned with the $2 million target that was given to us at the staff meeting. I'm only going to go over ideas 1 and 2 and allow you to look at 4 and 5 later on. Idea 1 was to decrease the site funds reduce the 301 site fund contribution to $350, transition to the Silver Plan, and implement a 95-5 insurance cost split. This would result in a $2,372,000 approximate savings. However, as the potential income loss table would show, a 301 eligible employee would lose $1,750 from their salary, plus incur a 341 yearly cost for the 5% coverage of insurance. Idea number 2, notably, the central business office is not reporting any cuts. Given this, we strongly propose that the 4 district administrators who currently receive fully paid family benefits no longer receive these benefits. Eliminating this provision would save $46,000, and under this plan, the district would take only $200,000 from the 301 site fund, transition to the Silver Plan, and maintain the 95-5 split for the insurance cost. This approach would yield $2,278,000 in savings, reducing the impact on employees. Again, referring to our income loss table of 301 eligible employees, they would see $1,000 reduction in salary plus the 341 yearly cost for insurance. We urge the board to table this item tonight to allow more time to consider every possible solution. The information has changed multiple times in less than a week, and it is evident that other potential cost-saving avenues have not been fully explored. We believe the best course of action is to delay the vote to ensure a well-informed decision that serves the best interests of our students, staff, and community. Additionally, we have some questions that we would like to pose to you. First, if teachers sign contracts before insurance changes are finalized, will they be released from their contracts without liquidated damages if necessary? Because it is on the agenda to propose contracts. The second question, have cost of living adjustments from the state been considered in the decision-making process? Finally, are you aware of the fear and the uncertainty that the spread among staff and parents and students due to the inconsistency of the presentation of this information? We strongly believe that additional review is necessary, including an examination of options like the ones we have provided you in the handout. which must be considered before a final decision is made. Tonight, we are not simply discussing numbers. We are determining the future of our district and the well-being of employees and students. We must take the necessary time to explore all options before making an irreversible cut. Therefore, we urge you to postpone the decision and commit to a more thorough review of all possible solutions. Thank you.
Administration, you want to respond to any of that, or you want to comment on any of it?
No, what I will comment is, Ms. Alonso, as I have said, information has been different from the very first time. And that is only because we have been exploring different options, different possibilities, and different revenues. So if that confused staff, I do apologize that, but I'm trying to find the very best possible solution. And one day, it may be one, and exploring options a different day, which is what you're doing here, but you put it all in 5 different areas. I had to do it over a 2-week period. And so with the information that is being shared, in no way are staff reductions. I think that was very clear. I'm not getting rid of people. The only 2 positions that we had to remove, which will cause the employee to be out of a job, are the 2 IT help desk technicians. Everything else on the table there are vacancies that we discussed thoroughly with each administrator and a recommendation from each administrator. So those are vacancies. The middle school, obviously the collapse of the ELA. So at this point, the 2 employees along with the 5 grant-funded IA positions are the ones that are impacted in terms of their job. Every other cut proposal that I am proposing on this agenda is due to the low class size enrollment and the discretion at the principal telling me I don't need that position. So I'm not getting rid of people per se. And that's all I have to say.
Mr. Soto, any part of that do you want to respond to?
No.
Ms. Cox? Board members, any questions, Ms. Alonso, or any response?
Thank you, Mr. President. If I may, does everybody handle in this insurance? Everybody is equal on these, the 4 administrative positions that she was talking about? Is that going to be treated equally now with the other employees?
When I bring the contract to, there's 1 director that was grandfathered in. There's 1 remaining from the 5. And the other 3 individuals that Ms. Alonso is referring to is Mrs. Cox, Mr. Soto, and myself. And so the language, I have a different contract. Mrs. Cox and Mr. Soto are yearly. And so that is up to the board to decide when that contract is taken to you.
Yeah, and we'll bring that back to the board shortly to address those 3 benefits to those people. And of course, as she mentioned, she's excluded, and just for public consumption, she's on a 3-year contract that included that benefit. Any other, Mr. Smith, any questions or comments?
Not for this. I do have several questions, but it's more in the weeds about the actual budget stuff, so I think I can wait until we get to that.
Do you want to add, you can, that's pertinent now. If
Okay.
you want to ask him, go ahead.
Okay, so some of the questions, whenever we were looking at the different plans that they have listed here, the gold plan, classic gold, classic silver, is it correct for me to say that the board contribution, what we would be paying, is the same for each plan? It just,
Correct.
the amount the employee pays would be
The
different.
difference between
Okay,
those plans.
So
Correct.
I take it the employees are not gonna get an option of them to choose which plan. We're going to decide which one is best, is that?
No, the
They
employee will have the
get the
opportunity
chance
to choose
whether it's the gold, the classic, or
silver.
the silver,
correct.
or whatever, and then they get to decide how much their contribution is going
Yes,
to be.
the recommendation
So,
from the administration is 90-10 on the silver.
Originally, if I remember right, according to what the budget, we have 800,000 that we need to keep in M&O that we're not gonna be able to move. Is that correct? Or
It's-
we need 800,000
It's-
in savings?
It was the
750.
transfer, the 750,000 that we were transferring from the capital funds to the
That we
M&O.
can't do that anymore?
Correct.
Okay. So we need 800,000 or 750, whichever way you want to put it, to be able to make that budget balance correctly. From what I understand, the moving to the silver plan at 75-25, that was going to save, if I remember right, 1.1 million, which would cover that.
It was less than that.
Compared to, okay, according to the figures you gave us, the entire cost of the insurance was 3.2 million. That the new cost under the silver 25 was 2.1 million. It's 1.1. So that would tell me that it's a savings of about 1.1 million, which would cover that shortfall with M&O. But we don't know in the future because obviously insurance is going to increase, whether it's to it. But so now I'm trying to decide exactly. We're trying to decide. Ms. Saniego brought up a 90-10 plan instead of the 75-25. Is that going to produce the same amount of savings?
Yes. As you will know, there's a lot of factors on the budget to begin with. There's been changes in terms of carryover per se that I was projected to be in around 300,000. Right now, we're sitting on a projection of 600,000, which kind of brings that amount to the M&O side of things, where now we can use that amount to pay for the additional 15% of the board contribution. So, but on the other side, the numbers in terms of enrollment on ADM, as Mrs. Cox said, are showing still decline. Not horrible, not bad, but 6, 7, from the last month, it was a loss of almost 7 kids. So again, there's a lot of variables in terms of the revenues and the money we have available in savings to do
So
that.
I guess where it's kind of confusing me, if the board's contribution was 75% and we were saving X amount of dollars, but now it's 90% and we're still saving that same amount, I don't see how that works. That, if we're paying more, how are we still saving the same amount? And if so, is that still making up for that $750,000 or $800,000 shortfall? Is it enough to cover it? And I would hope a little bit more because we can expect insurance prices to go up again.
Right, and that's what I'm
That's like
saying.
taxes.
In the future, yeah, it will be a different scenario. But like I just explained, in terms of the savings number, there's more projected carryover that I'm going to have for next year that is going to help out to pay that difference in the 75 to the 90.
You don't have the same carryover if we go with the 75-25?
That's separate. That's separate.
Well,
issue.
that's why I'm sitting there.
Right.
That's why I'm sitting there saying,
Right.
if you're saying that it affects the budget because of the carryover you get from other, that's going to affect the amount of money that we need to do, why does that affect the amount of money that we're paying, either whether it's 75% or 90% of the insurance?
I'm trying to think on how to explain it on better words, I guess. The projected carryover at the beginning was 300,000, right?
Okay.
Which we were still
Right?
trying to find or saving 800 and some thousand, or to avoid the, not to avoid, that was at the beginning, that was included that transfer. Once we found out that, okay, we're not gonna be able to transfer the capital money anymore. So after closing POs and after the expenditure freeze, right now, we have a projected carryover of 600,000, which kind of helps out, correct? But then there's other factors that, so it's a moving target, I'm gonna use that term, that drives my forecast for next year. So, again, I don't have my forecast in front of me to tell you specifically what is it costing, but after looking at all of the different resources outside of the M&O, that's what we're saying, that we're able to come out with the 90-10 instead of the 75-25. That is gonna help on the M&O side of things.
Help or eliminate the problem?
Eliminate the problem of the transfer, that we won't have to have that transfer.
And offer a
Well,
better plan.
Excuse me for interrupting you, but The projected conversation is the interaction with answering her questions. We'll get into all of these. When the board deliberates, we're gonna get a motion on the floor, and then we'll have the board with more interaction with the
Yeah.
staff and more information at that time. Right now, let's address her. Any,
That's what I
Mrs.
thought.
Salchow, do you have any questions regarding anything that she had to say of her?
No.
Mr. Lindeman?
No, all good.
Mr. Ramos?
No.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
The next one is Brita Kimball. She's representing herself.
I got to say, the changing information makes it difficult to write a statement. Good evening, President Brain, members of the board, Mrs. Samaniego, DUSD administration, and guests. My name is Brita Kimball, and I've worked with this district for 17 years. In that time, I've seen a lot of changes, and with that, I understand that change sometimes has to happen to solve problems. The current problem involves the budget constraints of the district. I watched the work study session last Thursday in an effort to educate myself about the budget and possible cuts. I noticed that since Thursday, the information has changed multiple times. What was presented during the work study was slightly different than what was emailed out to the staff to review for the survey, and what was presented on Monday's informational meeting was yet again different. And at 3:27 p.m. today, we received an email with, yet again, changed info. This last set of info does look much better, though. Given that the information has changed at least 4 times in less than a week, it makes me think that, just perhaps, the district has not fully investigated all of the options to solve the budget problems. I have some concerns about the options the district is considering. I took a look at the cuts that are being made at multiple sites. I saw that there are cuts proposed for all of the schools: IT, preschool, ESS, and CFPD. I noticed that there were no cuts proposed for security, the superintendent's office, finance and payroll, or warehouse and transportation. I am left wondering why cuts were not made in every department across the district. This is a district-wide issue. Therefore, I think everyone should have to give something up to solve the problem. I also think that the district has not explored all options to solve the problem. I thought of one idea that could be a source of revenue for the district and quite possibly increase enrollment. This idea is to take some of the preschool classrooms and turn them into childcare centers. The current preschool model does not cater to people that work. Our preschool sessions are less than half a day long. I think they're 2.5 hours long. If we modified the hours to accommodate working parents, you would probably fill those classrooms. You could also charge more tuition. When I had to pay for childcare, I was paying between $350 and $500 a week for 2 children to be in daycare. Also, finding reliable and quality childcare was one of the hardest things for me as a working parent. If the district had 5 full-day childcare classrooms that could each accommodate 20 kids and charged $500 a month for tuition, then that becomes a revenue generator. To be exact, that generates $50,000 a month. In fact, several years back, Chiricahua Community Health Centers approached DUSD with the idea to partner and create a quality childcare center that served DUSD and Chiricahua staff. Perhaps it is time to revisit this idea. I acknowledge that the school board has to make a difficult decision. I urge you to table the budgetary items tonight so that you can take time to explore all of the options before making a decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Members of the staff, do you want to respond to any of that? Members of the board, do you have any questions of Ms. Kimball?
No.
Thanks, Brita.
Thank you.
Next, we have Mr. Adam. Is it break?
It's break, yeah.
You're up.
All right. It's a great day for handouts, too. I want to commend all the teachers that are speaking today. It's tough at times to bring up hard news to your employer, and these are some brave people behind me. And one thing I will say off the bat, I do disagree. One statement, Mr. Brain, you said was that the future is gloomy. It is not gloomy. It is what we make it, and that's why we're having these conversations and these talks today. I have 2 sons who attend Stevenson Elementary. I have 1 son who's on the preschool wait list. Obviously, it's not looking very promising after last week's meeting that he'll get there, but I'm deeply concerned about the state of the district currently. And going back to last week's meeting, the words and what seemed to be the key word was declining enrollment. I had a tally about 20 times that word was used. Not once during the meeting was it mentioned what the projected enrollment was. Had a few teachers mention numbers they're hearing in staff meetings, which are varying. I mean, I've heard as low as 40 and as high as 1,200. I'd come prepared with enrollment numbers last week's meeting from the Arizona Department of Education website, pulled right from them, and the numbers I had were not the same numbers presented on the PowerPoint. However, there was no citation on the PowerPoint. I really couldn't determine what numbers we're talking about. And I think I'm going to echo what everyone has said here tonight. We are not ready to make a decision that affects children's and teachers' lives. That you have not had enough information. Not enough has been given. With the data, even if you ran a regression analysis on the numbers, you're looking at 78 student loss on average based on just the pure calculus of it. Budgeting and projecting is difficult. It's not rocket science, though. We have a pretty good idea. I'm guessing we should have a good idea as to what we can expect next year, which I'm guessing is going to be around 78 students is going to be the decline next year, based on math. If we have any calculus teachers, thank you for all you do. Now, if there's a reason the number is going to be bigger than 78, because that seemed to be the boogeyman of last week's meeting, was declining enrollment. If it's going to be bigger than that, then that's probably something to be really important for the community to know. However, if we're merely speculating, that's not good either. That's a very risky strategy. If we're speculating, for example, that the Trump administration is going to affect our attendance somehow drastically, that's a very high-risk strategy, and it is unlikely to pay off. And we should not, under any circumstance, make decisions that will affect children's and staff lives based purely on speculation. Some areas to consider, and I do have handouts, and I do have an example of what another school district does that I found to be helpful. In addition to these enrollment trends, looking at comparative areas with some peer groups assigned by the state of Arizona. Transportation. Our peer group average is $2.79 per peer for transportation. Our number is $6.87. We are the highest in our group. And I know initially the thoughts are, okay, well, we're in Douglas, we travel a lot, but Wilcox also travels a lot. Ash Fork, Ray, St. John's, Tombstone. We're paired with schools that travel as much as we do, yet we can't seem to control those costs as well as they do. Why are we not looking there? Instructional spending. Our instructional spending compared to our peers has increased about $1,005 from the previous year. We're around the higher there. Where is that money going? What's happening there? Is there something there that we can look at? Operational spending. Operational spending is an increase of $1,625 from fiscal year 2023 to 2024. Once again, where is that? Let's start turning over some stones. Let's see what it is that's increased, because things they do sneak up on you. I'm not going to pretend that it's easy to run a business in today's environment. It's incredibly difficult. Cesar Soto, Ana San Diego, you have an incredibly difficult job, and I do not want to discredit at all anything that you do. But I do believe that there are important conversations we have yet to have. I would recommend that the district put on an interactive town hall and present to whoever wants to attend the raw data and allow people to have an open and collaborative conversation. Ms. Kimball has a wonderful idea, and I guarantee that hundreds of people in this community have wonderful ideas to start to combat some of these things. And initially, if the issue is declining enrollment, also, where's the marketing? Where's the messaging? Have we called families who've left? Have we asked them why they've left? Have we invited them to come back? There are things that just might not be happening. We do need to have a collaborative conversation, and not a town hall simply where the superintendent stands up, presents a PowerPoint, and we all have juice and cookies after, but a truly interactive meeting, sitting at tables, pens at the ready, papers, splitting our problems into groups so they may discuss what solutions they may be able to find. Breaking down in an incredibly thorough way the budget, several people on several areas, I think we need something like that. And then let the community members share their ideas and make sure that we turn over every single possible stone before cutting programs and affecting the staff and children. And it would also be a great way for Superintendent, Mr. Soto, that's a great way to get community buy-in too, make them part of the solution. You might be surprised at what people could come up with. I would strongly encourage that recommendations that were made currently, board, there's not sufficient data, don't approve them. I don't think these recommendations are fully baked yet. Even in the meeting that it mentioned that the 301 committee had an ad hoc meeting the morning of the board meeting. What teacher at 7:30 in the morning is gonna give you any valuable information when they're thinking about their first class? Like that just wasn't an efficient way to do it. So do your duty as a board. It felt a little half-baked last week, the work session. There's more data. It's gotta be better data. It's gotta be cited. It's gotta be real. And I think there's a lot more that can be done. Now, I'll hand you a copy of what I've written tonight, and also, I have this copy. This is from the West Claremont School District in Ohio. This is a report, and I have copies of this for the board and for whoever else would want. This is a report that they use. They're going off. It has all the data that you can possibly see to make, millage rates, demographic data, personnel data, property valuation, tax data, local effort data, operational expenditure, similar districts. It breaks it down. Their district, similar district, statewide districts. I think we need more information, and I think we can get out of this. I don't think this is something that we cannot conquer here in Douglas. However, it feels very un-Douglas to say declining enrollment and then roll over and die and give up on fighting. That is, I've been here 7 years. If I've learned anything about Douglas, whatever that is, that ain't it. That's not Douglas. So I'm gonna give you guys all a copy of this. Just as a reference, I highly recommend no decisions be made. Have these town halls. The community can help. We're here. We're a good resource. We want to succeed. No one wants to see the school district fail. And frankly, in today's environment with the school, a lot of districts around the state are dealing with the likes of like ALA, the charter school, right? We start cutting enough and maybe we start looking attractive to them. You think declining enrollment's bad now? Declining enrollment would be horrendous if we had a school like ALA decide they want to build a big, beautiful campus behind Walmart there. That could be a death blow to the district. We need to take this seriously, but we need to be very, very calm, collected, and very specific with what we're doing. So.
What was your name again?
My name's Adam. My cell phone's on there, so you guys can bother me if you want.
Thank you, Adam.
I don't have a president to hand it out for.
Thank you.
Cool. Any questions?
No questions.
Are you done with your presentation?
I mean, I can keep going if you'd like.
No. That's fine.
Now's the musical number, if we'll move on to that. No, I'm done with my presentation.
No, your comments are appreciated. Members of the board, do you have any questions, any response to anything he said?
No comments, but I think a lot of what Mr. Brake said are things that we should take some serious looks at. There was some good recommendations, along with some other that we've heard from people here. So I do think there's stuff that we need to look at before we make our final decision.
Ms. Helshaw?
Well, I feel really good to hear somebody else say that when we're missing children, we go out and we find them. that, I mean, we have child search for children with special needs. But when a child leaves our district and we know, and in most cases we do, somebody knows our students. They do. They know, we know when people move out of town and we find out people move back in town and where are they? And I have been pushing this for 4 years as to where are these children and what are we doing? Our parent liaison group, and tell me if I'm out of order, Mr. Brain.
No, you're good.
Okay.
As long as you're responding in part to what he
Right.
had to say.
Our parent liaisons, when that grant was written and on that position was written, it was to provide intervention to parents and for students and to find out, what is I'm not saying what's happening in their life at home, but when they are missing, where are they? And to follow up on that, even if it meant going to doors and knocking on them and finding out where those children are. And this has really been something that I haven't let go of, and I will not let go of it because they're out there. If I go to eat lunch at Pizza Hut and there's a parent with children that I notice are school-age children and it is not early release day, I approach them. Now, that makes Mr. Selchow very uncomfortable. It does. But if you know me, okay. And I do go up and I ask, not why aren't your children in school, but where are your children educated? Where are? It is very upsetting to hear when the parent says, oh, well, I'm homeschooling or I'm doing this online. And, I don't hear that they're at the charters. I usually hear those two things. Why? And I ask them why. Why? Because we have a great school district. I tell them I'm on the board. I go out and I do my very best to give, a positive picture of our district because we have a wonderful district and we have excellent teachers and our students are they're gold. So I just will always keep coming back to we can't let this go. We can't let them go. And if anything, too, not just from enrollment and money, but for what's good for those children. I'm afraid that children are being used for childcare. Our high school students, that now mom can take a shift at Walmart and go online and have online school and then have free childcare at home. And there's a lot more than just academics at stake. There's emotional, there's social things that are happening. And I just think, I'm sorry, I'm getting a little soapbox here, but those are things that are really concerning me. And it has to do with that enrollment.
Well, and you bet you could fill a room with 30 Janice Alchows making phone calls for a few hours every week. And because you're not alone in feeling that way.
Mr. Lindeman?
Thank you for your presentation. That was very informative. I'm really curious to know which information or which avenues that have not been explored specifically before we can make a decision.
Like it, in my opinion, or just
Sure,
in general?
yeah.
I mean, roughly 5. I mean, I think the transportation needs to be explored. I think, I think we gotta look at our operational costs as well. I think looking at the division between the percentage of teachers versus the percentage of administrators, there's a lot of things to look at, right? So, additionally, I think like Ms. Salchow had mentioned, I think looking at are we contacting these families? Are we marketing aggressively? Liberty is, Alpha Omega is, Cass is. I can't get on Facebook without one of them bugging me, right? But hey, they're at least there, and maybe that's why they're opening a preschool next year. Maybe that's why, because they're actually marketing it, right? We would need to look deeper just at the raw, transparent data. When an organization is in trouble, which I don't believe the future's doom and gloom, but I do believe realistically we're in trouble. I think we're in trouble. It's time for transparency. It's time for some facts and figures, real facts and figures. Everything, you got some teachers in here. Everything is cited. Everything has to be real data. Changing data, data points just don't change. right? And it's, if there are some things, like Mr. Soto said, that are a moving target, there are a lot of things that are not a moving target. Run a regression, right? Calculus is the way you can use math to tell the future. That's just the reality. We should be having a good idea with where we're at, and even just a comment of, you know, hey, I've worked the last 2 weeks on figuring out these cuts. I mean, even just 2 weeks on that, I mean, come on, this shouldn't be a surprise that we're in this situation. I don't know why it seems anyone would be surprised that we're here. But we need to get together, and we need to get more conversations going, and we need to get people reviewing everything, and we need to get it as transparent as possible, and with real numbers, right? And look, it probably was. I'm not accusing Ms. Samaniego of making up numbers, but there wasn't a citation, and it didn't line up with what I had, right? So that's, we need to deal with real stuff.
Mr. Ramos?
Well, first, I just wanted to comment, Jana, what you said right now was very well said, and that's been a problem going on for several years. And I come from the area in town, the south side of town, and a lot of parents don't give a heck. If they can give them a laptop, they can go there and just stay, they don't check to see if they do their work, We've lost several students that way. Our concern has always been for our students and our staff, and we've always been transparent as best as we can. And I've always said that we can't compare ourselves to different districts in Arizona, is because we're demographically way deep in a corner, where other places it's a lot easier and it's a lot harder for us to do things than what they can do, especially areas in our farm and our agricultural. We're 20,000, less than 20,000 population. I think we're down to 16,000. And we're fighting with 6 other schools and homeschooling. This board has been trying for years to do what's best for our students. They come number 1. I just wanted to make that clear.
Well, and with respect, Mr. Ramos, we don't have a monopoly here in Douglas on being a tough area. Chinle is a tough area. St. John's, Arizona is a tough area. Baghdad, Ash Fork. And I think it might actually be a disservice for us to say, hey, you know, Douglas, we're our own thing. I disagree that we don't have a monopoly on a tough situation. A lot of districts are going through this, but a lot of districts are using the data and getting out of it too.
You know, there's so much that I could say, because a lot of things that you said there would have prompted a immediate reaction from me in a separate forum, just on their own. Number one, the issue of transparency. What area of transparency are you talking about? You're talking about the financial, you're talking about personnel, you're talking about positions, you're talking about school sites. What do you mean by transparency?
I think reliability of data, right? Like transparency in a sense that I've heard a lot of teachers today mentioning that, you know, it's changing, meetings 5 different times. You know, I would say in that sense, transparency. And I realize transparency is a word that triggers a lot of emotions, but it's a word that's incredibly important.
No, it's not triggering anything. It's just that it caught my attention because, and then you said it, when you base that comment about what you're hearing from staff,
Mm-hmm.
and then you specifically say that the conditions or the options or the information changed 5 times. Do you realize what that district, and I know that you're a pro and that you're a financial man, but do you know all the variables that we deal with, that they deal with? And I always hate to mention, but I sat in that chair for many years, and I sat in another chair in different places with a lot more responsibilities, putting budgets together, knowing the variables, she wasn't exaggerating when she said it changed from day to day. Number one, and the most important thing was, the resource of the 301 monies, we went into that with an open mind, figuring that there was something that we could do that would benefit our staff, as always. But then we got the door slammed shut on us by our legal people, by saying you can't do that. In both areas, we concentrated on one, then we went to another. All in the effort to do the best thing we can for these people that you say we don't have transparency. Then we went to another.
I said
No,
we need more
excuse me,
transparency.
I've got the floor now.
Thank you.
And I don't mean to be rude, but let me respond and then you can respond to me.
All right.
All those variables that we deal with, and you thought and you think, and I agree with you, it is a very redundant term, enrollment. But do you realize that the enrollment drives 99% of this budget? This staff gets money for programs from the legislature, from the State Department, but they're very, very minuscule compared to what the student enrollment is. That is our main source of revenue. And every time we lose a kid, it's concerning. That's number one. The other thing, too, is when you talk about transparency, and whether you meant it or not, you're alluding to the staff, not the board, because the board couldn't be more transparent. We conduct our meetings and our deliberations in open. So when you talk transparency, you're talking to the administration. Give me an example where they're not transparent, notwithstanding what staff told you about it changing 4 or 5 times.
Okay. Well, I mean, first, I did address initially and say it's an incredibly difficult job they have. I understand organizations and the changes. I did run a skilled nursing facility during COVID, and I understand that things change by the hour. What I'm saying is transparency of conversations. Transparency of let's get all this data right here, and let's get it to everyone in a forum. Let's have an open conversation. In the sense of the board, their transparency is they assure transparency through hard questions. They assure transparency through pressing Ms. Samaniego, Mr. Soto. And Ms. Samaniego, Ms. Soto, they take the data, they take the input from the board, and they present solutions. Last week's meeting, I don't think anyone can say that that was at all a real solution and that it was well thought out. So in that case, I would say last week's meeting lacked transparency. That it really was. We were issuing hard cuts that affects teachers, and it seemed to be because tonight, Mr. Soto mentioned like 7 other things, which I appreciate. Last week, it was declining enrollment, and that seemed to be the hot ticket. So in that case, transparency, I think, is a bit of a trigger word, and I think it's a miscommunication to say that I am saying that they're not being transparent. What I said is we need more transparency.
Okay, well, and that's fine. Yeah. But just for the sake of conversation, because when anybody says, and I know that's a very sore spot with politicians, with governmental agencies and their governing boards, the word transparency. But when you said that the meeting the other night was like a Chinese fire drill, and I mean, that's what you're kind of alluding to, it was very disorganized, they didn't know what they were talking about. Do you realize the situation of being in a public entity and having all this responsibility and making major decisions on spending millions of dollars and not having to scurry around and jump in times and the places and the information and the data change from one day to the next, and then to top it all off, we go through all that exercise and then we're told by the attorneys, you can't do that. We're in a corner because this board has done, without them lifting a finger, more in benefits than any board has done here in the last 12 years. The biggest advocate for those teachers and our staff is this board. We've always told, they've even come to us with recommendations that that's the best we can do, and this board has told them, no, you go back and look again. and we've even changed the recommendation. The point I'm trying to make is that if you're critical, and regardless of what your information and what influencing you, is that this board doesn't know what they're doing because this staff isn't giving them the proper information, and they had to change one recommendation, the variables changed, the legality changed. They're doing the best they can because our top priority are the kids in this district, and their biggest variable and influence is that teacher and this staff. And I just want to say that, and I don't want you to think that I'm riled up about it, but that really, really rankles me when I hear somebody say that this board is not transparent and this administration is not transparent. And and I'm going to invite you, I liked a lot of what you said, but I'm going to invite you for transparency to meet with Mr. Soto. You probably, with Mr. Soto would get along very well because you're a numbers man as well.
I already get along with him. I like Mr. Soto.
All right, good, I'm
Yeah.
glad. You're not going to like me
And
when
my
you
cell
leave here.
phone number's on the
But-
outline.
And I invite you to meet with Mrs. Cox, talk to her about enrollment so that you understand the gravity of it. And I invite you to meet with Samaniego. She's the ultimate authority. She's the one that has to make these hard recommendations. We're having hard times. This has been very difficult for us on the insurance. We didn't even give our people a raise this year because we can't. Thank God we gave them a one-time payment a few months ago, and we've done it before. We've done it every opportunity we've had. They are uppermost in our mind. And I just want you to know that. And again, I want to say, you did trigger me when you mentioned the word enrollment. You go around, you keep making reference to state districts. Let me make reference to a few. You go to those districts that shut down in Phoenix, Yuma, Antelope Well, you go over there and see how transparent they are and find out how important it is to have a good enrollment. How can they talk to you about a declining enrollment when all we think of prospective enrollment, when all we see is decline? You're welcome back here anytime you want, and I welcome, because it's good to hear other sides rather than we get into this static every meeting. So you're welcome to come back anytime you want to, and I'd welcome you to. You can meet with any member of the board, but please sit down with Mr. Soto. Let him tell you the gravity of what he goes through. Okay?
And Mr. Brain, if the question you initially asked was, do I have experience working with a nonprofit that runs tens of millions of dollars here in this county? Yeah, I do. And I do have experience bringing up some hard things to talk about, and I have experience with the fallout from that. So it's in healthcare, but not a school district. But yeah, I have experience bringing up hard things, and that's exactly what I'm here to do, because that's what we need to do to move forward. And I want to clarify, I asked for more transparency. Never once did I say that you're not being transparent. I said you could be more transparent. Those are two different things.
I don't want to play semantics with you, but when you say you need to be more transparent.
I'll play semantics, but I said more transparent, which means can be marginally transparent, or we are not 0% transparent. We are transparent to some extent. We could always be more transparent. That's not saying they're not transparent.
Okay.
And I would never accuse, these are great people, I know a lot of you, I would never accuse Mitch Lindemann of not being transparent. But I also won't sit here and say that we need to have less transparency. That certainly wouldn't do anything.
And again, not that I'm wrapping it up with you, you can
Oh, it's all
continue
good.
to talk, but, and I also want to mention last week's study session, and I'm going to apologize to you again. Study sessions are the board deliberating with information given by staff. And I know you came over here, you took special time to come over here and address the board, and I'm going to apologize. The people that addressed the board, or the ones that were allowed to speak, were the ones that gave the board information that the board thought was necessary for them to make a decision, all right? So I just want to go over that again with you.
Oh, no, and I appreciate it, and
Okay.
thank you for all you do. I certainly don't want to sound disrespectful, but we do have hard conversations we need to have.
Very good.
So, and I think the whole community should be meeting in these town hall meetings. I would love to meet with Cesar Soto.
Well,
and
that's
San Diego.
administrative. You know, if they want to have those meetings and they want to talk about those things, that's up to them. You
Well, and
give them
I
a lot of
think the
good
board
ideas.
should strongly encourage them that it would behoove them to do so. So,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Members of the board. We're done with everybody that wants to address the board on that subject, on that topic.
I think you had.
Did we have somebody else? Oh, we did. I'm sorry. Danitza,
Elias.
what's the last name? Danitza, are you still here?
Yes, she's right.
I apologize for taking all your time. And Danitza wants to talk to Ines Moreno, and she wants to talk about funding enrollment and effects on academics. Go ahead. You want to identify yourself for the record, please?
Yes. So, good afternoon, Mr. President, Mrs. Samaniego, and members of the board and the public. My name is Danitza Moreno, and I am a parent of an 11th grader. And thank you, Mr. Brake. I do appreciate you bringing up some of, I think everybody's concerns. But, if the repetition here is enrollment, what are we doing to bring kids back, right? And I'll be completely honest. Last year, my son is, he's gifted. Ms. Alcha was his must teacher, and we've had challenges trying to get him the classes that he needs. So one of my concerns is, so now that we're having issues with enrollment getting, decreasing, I know that triggers a lot of other things, and one of my concerns is, not just for my kid, because I used to teach. I was a math teacher at Cass, and then I was a math teacher at Loretto. And so one of my concerns is those kids, either the kids that are way at the top or the kids that are struggling, are the ones that fall in the cracks. And I am that parent that goes to the meetings. I am that parent that goes to administration to try to get my son the best possible education. And before, the carrot that DHS used to dangle back in my time, and I'll be coming, I'm short of my 30th year reunion, but I remember that everybody used to prefer the Douglas High School because there were sports. And that's something that nobody else had, so everybody would prefer to go to DHS. Now we are competing with club sports, and there are other things, and parents are much more aware of other opportunities. And, Mr. Brake, I love that you said that we don't need to look at this as doom and gloom. We can also look at this as an opportunity as to reevaluate what has been done to bring those kids back. My office is at the Gadsden, and today they had the meeting room for the students for Primavera that were testing, and it was a packed room. Those students were testing. I'm sure they were just juniors because my son was testing as well. So, we can, say numbers are going down, but could it also mean that we are going to get an increase of students, because I know for a fact that some teachers are being laid off from the charter schools? So are we prepared to see a change because of politics? Are we prepared to, what are we going to do? Because if teachers quit, it's very hard to get a teacher back. And so I think we can't just prepare for one scenario, which is enrollment is down, and let's cut funding. And then as a teacher, you don't need another stressor on the teachers, and I do appreciate, I'm not a teacher, but I do like the fact that you're trying to do, so thank you, because if they're better, our kids are better. If they don't worry in the classroom, then I don't worry about, my child being at school. So I do commend you for trying to do whatever it is that you are doing, but so if enrollment increases, one of the things that I just thought of, if enrollment increases, are you going to change the 90-10? Are you going to cover everything for the teachers? And then what's going to be affected? So teacher funding or the insurance is one thing, but how is that going to affect the classroom? How is that going to affect my son being in the classroom? Is he going to have less opportunities? Are programs going to be cut? Because like I said, everything is gonna be trickled down. This is just one component. And I'm with the teachers, you know, I've been there, and salaries are low for teachers. It's almost missionary work that they're doing. So.
It's a good analogy.
Let's see, what else do I have here? What are we gonna be doing to bring in students? So like they said, you know, marketing, I've gotten, everybody at CAS has on their WhatsApp status that they're having something tomorrow for, you know, to bring in enrollment. And then I know, you know, there's a lot of talk about the border construction starting. Are we gonna get
Denise, let
more-
me interrupt you a minute.
Yes.
As long as you keep using that word enrollment, then you're on task, you're on the topic. But when you deviate, then I want you, if you could, please just stick to
Yeah.
the insurance, the enrollment, the contributing factors and those kinds of things. And then you're welcome to come back any other time and talk about those other things if you want to.
So because of the border construction, is that going to trigger an increase in enrollment? You know, I know it might, they're not gonna go to school, but they might come with families, and that might have an increase in enrollment. So, you know, you all have a very tough job, and I commend you for your time and for your effort. But as a parent, this does not look good, and I'm concerned for how that will come down. If enrollment is low, how is that gonna affect students?
Well, we just got told by Mr. Brake?
Mr. Brake.
The staff, and I think they heard him well, that they should be looking at projected enrollments, but you realize how difficult that is? That's why the budget is like it is. You can't project enrollment, but I'm not gonna get into that again. But
I'm a calculus teacher.
But if you want to have that conversation, you know, about the particulars of the Douglas School District, you're welcome to talk to Denise Cox. She's over the Student Center and so on. So thank you for your comments.
You're welcome, and thank you all. And, you know, you invited Mr. Brake, you invited me. I think it's time to have some, you know, something where all of us can participate.
Thank you. Ida, you submitted a request, and I'm going to honor it, but what part of the agenda did you want to speak on?
And it wasn't on the agenda, Mr. Brain. I just wanted to speak on a project that I think would really help the community and your enrollment.
Well, why don't you, if you've got enrollment on your mind, get up to the mic there. You might as well. We're having a free-for-all anyway.
Well, good afternoon, and board members and president. I'm here because I believe that one of the biggest fallacies that happens here in the community of Douglas, overall Douglas, is communication. We don't have good communication in the city of Douglas. We don't have a way to communicate with our parents, with the constituents here, and right now you're talking enrollment. Enrollment, I agree with what Mr. Breaker said and with her. We are not promoting enrollment in Douglas. What is affecting us? We need to think outside this box. We're constantly redoing the same things over and over. You want enrollment? Sports, activities. Those students that are going out of our district, because I see students from all facets. I have a business downtown, and I see a lot of students. Why do they leave? One, and I'm going to tell you, Mr. Brain, one was because they didn't understand the teachers. And although I've been told they all are fluent, many of them were not, and the English affected them severely. I've always sent those parents to speak to Ms. Samaniego. If they come, I don't know. But I send them to her because math is a critical subject. So we've lost students to those, they may be small, but you lose one, then you lose the brother, the sister, and think, families in Douglas don't have one. I'm a product of 5 children, so. But going on, that's, and it's an issue that we need to look at. What are we doing? The other thing I wanted to address is communication is not very effective because most parents in Douglas do not do social media. Social media is not big here.
Well, you know, Ida, we're getting way off the subject.
Well, but
And
I'm saying-
I just want to make sure that you're free to speak, but we're governed by a very strict rule, and we're talking insurance and the variables that contribute to it. In the topic you're beginning on is
Well,
not
how-
gonna, is not relevant.
Well, what I'm saying is, how do you contact parents? How are you contacting parents? How are you finding out why they're pulling out their students? Why? What method?
Regarding enrollment.
Regarding
I just want to
enrollment.
keep saying that because I want to
Okay,
make sure
I
we
will keep
stay
saying it's
legal.
enrollment, but what are we doing? How are we, way back, Mr. Brain, when I worked here, we had 50%, 49 to 50% dropout. There was no means of the data to find out why. Now the state has the information that you can go in and find out and ask why. Why are they pulling out the students? Many parents will say they're moving, which isn't true because of the number that they have. You can track them when they go to the different schools in the community. But are we finding out? If we're not addressing the issues why students are dropping out of DHS, she said something before. DHS, the public schools, we were number one. That's where we wanted. Look at how many charter schools have opened up. Their enrollment is going up, up, up. She says they're losing teachers. Well, the ones I've spoken with, they're happy. I don't know. But we need to look at that, Mr. Brain. We need to think outside the box to get the enrollment, and we need to keep those good teachers in our districts.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Well, thank you, and for the sergeant at arms there, we stayed on task as she kept talking about enrollment, which affects the cost that we're discussing today and on the enrollment. And the other thing too, I have to say that her uncle was president of the Arizona State Senate when I needed to be confirmed to the State Board of Education, and if I hadn't had his help, because he's the boss, he was the president of the Senate, I wouldn't have been there. So I just wanted to say that, and I'm really saying that tongue in cheek, all right? All right, thanks, Ida. Let's get back to the issue of the insurance, and I think we're finished with everybody that wants to address the board, right? And it's always good, regardless of whether we got a little adrift or not, but to hear everybody, as long as it was somewhat relevant. Board members, what is your, so we can get into our conversation, what's your pleasure? I need a motion.
I would like to just say that a lot of these ideas are great ideas. We should follow up on these things, following the parents, following the students, maybe looking at the child care type of thing. That's, might be a going concern. But the insurance here, specifically on this item, I think, I feel good that this is the best we can do at this time. And so, if I may, I'd like to move to approve the board contributions for health benefits for fiscal year 2025, 2026.
As presented with as presented
As
by the
presented.
administration. Is there a second?
Second.
By Mr. Ramos. Discussion. Mr. Smith.
I'm going to start off with, the whole reason that we've started with this. My confidence has been shook a little bit in the way things have been given to us and presented. This whole mess started because we were taking money and moving it from one account to the M&O to cover shortfalls in a budgetary system, and that was a common and acceptable practice right up until the Auditor General said it wasn't, and if we kept doing it, we're going to be in trouble. Now we're having to scramble to come up with ways to cut our budget, ways to save money. When we went to the work study, we were presented with 4 options, which obviously it was changing so rapidly. By the time we had our next meeting, we were down to 1 option. Because out of the 4, none of them were viable except for possibly 1. And that's what we're looking at right now. Now we're sitting there saying, well, mainly our options are either change the insurance where the employees have to pay one amount, or change the insurance where they have to pay another amount. again, when I was talking with Mr. Soto, I'm not clear on how, if the district is paying for 75% of an insurance plan, or if we're paying for 90% of an insurance plan, we're still saving the same amount of money, or we're still coming out with the same amount of money. That just is not logical to me. So we've been, as I said, all this has been moving very quickly. There's been some very good ideas brought up. I'm kind of curious, why is our transportation cost so much higher than everything else? And if it, can it be just because of the distance we travel? I don't know that that's viable either. I'm sure other school districts cover that amount or more. What is, there are a number of options that we could be looking at to try and cut down on some of this, at least reduce the amount of money that we're going to have to save for the M&O, and possibly even save the amount that the employees are going to, have to pay for insurance, if that has to be changed at all. I think we need more information, and I think we need more data in this. So again, I'm kind of leaning towards, why are we going to rush and make this decision today?
Well, one of the things that I'm certainly going to defer to Mr. Soto, he's the money guy. He's the one that works with that. And then Sonia's here to support him if she needs to, with maybe some more deeper figures. But one of the things is in the dynamic, the important one was that one of the main option was that we looked at was no insurance at all. And
that's not a legitimate option, because the American Care.
Well, that was an option at the board, that we not spend any money on insurance, period.
And
That was an option.
By law, ACA, if you have more than 50 employees, you have to provide some type of health insurance.
Well-
That's according to the ACA federal law.
Right, but in the scheme of everything, when you look at the big picture, the one thing we didn't want to do was we didn't want to even address, if we didn't have to, no insurance at all.
Right.
So then that's when they went, and they had to start scrambling, to quote you, and looking at all those different
Looking at
funds.
possible
All
301
right.
money, and then we found out again, as I said, it changed rapidly. We couldn't use 301. That left us with one option. out
Well,
of those
no,
four.
it changed the dynamics of what they were gonna do to accommodate any other option, and that's how they came up with the 75-25. But this is more administrative, and I'm gonna let you answer the specific question that he asked at first.
Which the question specifically is about how much we
Okay,
save.
so-
How can you have the same amount of money when?
Yeah, we were talking about the district paying 75% of the
Correct.
insurance versus 25% paid by the employee. But now we're being told that now the district can pay 90% of the cost of the insurance, with the employee paying 10%, and we're still going to be able to save the same amount. We're not going to need and from what you'd said earlier, well, it's because these other funds has been changing. Again, I don't see a lot of budgetary numbers changing rapidly, and that's where I'm kind of having a problem,
And it makes total sense, Mr. Smith, because on the information on the 75-25, Mr. Soto's numbers were that it would be an approximate saving of $805,000 and $231.35. So I think, Mr. Soto, what he's asking is, this was a 75-25, right? Not utilizing any 301 monies as we thought.
Correct.
So the contribution of the board is definitely a lot less. So there was a cost savings there by not providing 100% of the insurance. So the savings there, in addition to the reducing, going down from the copay gold to the silver plan, was in an additional, I believe you had given me $250,000 savings, right? So that's where you came up with the $805,000 and some dollars, right?
Correct.
So what and this is the question that I asked you right before, earlier today. So be prepared to answer, what is the cost savings? We were only going to be utilizing the M&O fund there. You were going to pay for insurance.
Correct.
You were going to pay for 75% of the insurance board contribution from the M&O budget, right?
Yes.
Okay, on the
Yes, ma'am.
75-25.
On the 75-25.
So with the new discussions we had this morning, could we do something more for our staff? Then we looked at what the discussions we had had previously with Mr. Bahrain are, can we look at other funding sources, right?
Correct.
Initially, it was like, no, we don't want to touch those other funding because we want to have a rainy day. So then, if the proposal right now, based on conversations that we all had this morning with Mr. Bahrain, giving your financial knowledge, is a 90-10. So what Mr. Smith is asking, then what is the cost savings for a 90-10? We're using a portion of M&O to pay for part of the 90%.
Correct.
And we're going to look at some other funding
Other
sources
funding
that you're going to
sources.
pull monies from in order to be able to support the 90%. So in general, what is the cost savings in the 90 proposal?
Okay,
It's
that's
gonna
very
be-
good. Let Mr. Soto have that dialogue now with Mr. Smith.
Right, so, again, we're going in terms of, it's actually not a savings, because now the district is paying for a higher contribution towards the to health insurance. Again, the whole focus of things here is to be and have a healthy M&O, maintenance and operations fund, right? So that was the projected savings in terms of the maintenance and operations budget, the 800 and some. And there's the reason why you see the same amount, is because I'm using other different sources that are not driven by enrollment, that we have cash funds where we can pay for the additional 15%. So we're covering from different funds, not including capital whatsoever, to not make a transfer, to be able to sustain that additional 15% in contribution.
And there are no problems, because as we've said, the whole thing started when we were taking capital out and moving it to M&O, and then we found out we can't do that. Now your response is, okay, well, we won't take it out of capital, we'll take it out of some other places, we don't know where, but other places, and make up the difference. Do we know for a fact that that is not going to cause a problem with the Auditor General? Or is that something that we wait until, and
No.
find out again later on?
No, it shouldn't. It shouldn't create any issues. Like I said, Mr. Smith, I mean, this is funds that we have there that are generated. I'll give you an example of one of the funds is the revenue we get from Chiricahua renting the ELC. As you well know, we get $14,000 a month in rent from them. So it's cash money that doesn't have to be tied to enrollment whatsoever, or different kinds of different revenues. So.
Well, what was that money being used for previously? It was being used for something.
Correct. So again, currently, as you will know, we have a freeze in expenditures, but we still have to have a lot of things that we still need to purchase, like toilet paper and things like that. I'm using that fund to purchase those necessary things for the sites, for the schools.
Okay.
So you have that budget and then that fund, and then you have another one that you are looking into as a possibility to offset
Right.
the 15%.
We're looking at the, correct me if I'm wrong, it's the.
MIPS?
The MIPS, and MIPS is money that is generated, and it's tied to enrollment a little bit, but it's generated by services provided to ESS students. So people that we get, it depends on the services, stuff like that we get from the federal government. We get monies for providing those services to the students. There's no a specific amount or fixed amount that I can give you, that I can tell you, but it's also another source of revenue that it will cover that 15% addition. And again, I'm projecting these numbers, making sure that we're still gonna be on a healthy financial position and not getting into issues in the future that is gonna create issues with the Attorney General or stuff like that.
So over the last 2 weeks, while we've been advised of this problem, you've identified those areas where you could make some cuts, we could make some savings, we could keep that money in
Right.
M&O or move it to M&O or whatever we need to do. Are you absolutely positive there's not other areas?
we don't have any other sources of revenues besides that at all.
Not necessarily sources of revenue savings? Stuff where we spend less on things?
We're absolutely looking at things that we're doing that right now in terms of do we need, is it a need or is it a want? But also always keep in mind that a little bit more than 85% of that budget is salaries and benefits, right? So we don't have a lot of wiggle room to work with.
Understood there, but
So-
I'm wondering if there's not places where we could improve and be more efficient, prevent making some cost savings. You know, that's one of the reasons why I'm sitting there saying, I think we need to look a little bit more into this. We might be able to come up with more savings, be able to, at the very least, we've already moved from the point of where the employee's having to pay 25% to where the employee's having to pay 10. Yes, we would much rather have where they don't have to, you know.
Right.
Although, as I think that was made clear in one of the meetings, I think we're the only district in the state or something that does that.
No, there's several. So what I was saying then is that using the 301 monies, which we thought was paying for insurance. A lot of the districts, many districts, as I got insight from all these consultants in financial and legal, a lot of the districts utilize their 301 funds to offset some of the costs that come out of the O&M budget, such as teacher salaries or any of the areas that I said. So for example, when I said it, we're amongst one of the districts, or only, I get feedback from our Gallagher consultant. She's the one that we work with, and we start analyzing what projections are for insurance purposes. So she has indicated to us, you probably need to start looking at not such a rich plan, because you're one of the districts, if any, so that still provide, the rich plan maybe 100%. But there's other districts that do provide 100% of their insurance because, like we've been able to do that. Their budget is still able to do that. So.
Yeah, until we weren't.
And, yes, but those districts utilize their governing boards, use those 301 funds as intended by the statute to cover some of those areas. We don't. We never have. Those 301 monies, since they were issued, nobody in this district, and I'm talking 15 years, 20 years ago, never considered utilizing the money as it was intended to do and not strictly for performance pay. That's a variation, and that has been repeatedly said to me this week. You guys don't use that for budget salary increases? You don't use 301 monies just for teachers or the qualifying people? No, we don't. You don't use it to pay for support staff services? No, we don't. You don't use it to pay the increase in insurance premiums? No, we don't. Why not? Those are the tough questions, and that's what I said. Not now, but in the future, we really need to sit down and have a discussion about those 301 monies. So.
Did you have anything else, Mr. Smith?
No, I think I've got.
I'm really glad that Mr. Soto, truthfully, you asked that question because he got pinned down, and honestly, the intent of the board was always to do what's in the best interest of the staff. We could have let it go. I got involved because I represent the board, and I can truthfully tell you that they were all reluctant to look in those other funds. He mentioned MIPS, Civic Center, all those funds. They've been aware of them. They knew it. They knew we're not going to touch capital. And so in order to do this coming year for our staff, so that they didn't struggle and then go home and wonder, how in the world are we going to do without insurance? $695 without any premium provided by the district or more. And then even some of those plans, it would have been impossible to cover their families. And they commiserated. And we sat down and literally looked at every avenue. And we decided to make the recommendation to the board that we use the MIPS funds and that we use that Civic Center fund. And not the Civic Center, the,
Plant sale.
Yeah.
the Sale.
and, because there's money there. But that money is rainy day money. You don't customarily use MIPS money for salaries. It's allowable, like a lot of things are allowable. Like a while back, we were talking about providing money for banquets. And when it was questioned, the staff said, well, it's allowable. Well, sure, it's allowable. It's not illegal. He said it's not illegal, it's allowable. And it's allowable to buy Barbie dolls for everybody in the district too, if this board approved it. But the point is, and that's an exaggeration, but the point is that we definitely wanted to walk out of here today and have our staff be covered by insurance. We didn't want them to agonize over it anymore. And that's why we tapped those two funds, to be honest with you. And when he said we used other resources, those were the resources. So that's why, in your question about how can we have the same, well, because those other funds are not driven by the same revenues. That's how that happens, and it was a good question. And so I hope that suffices, in fact, is somewhat of an explanation. And the reason we're here, we want our staff to be comfortable if we can, right?
It provides an explanation to be able to cover the insurance for this year.
Correct.
And, we all know that's gonna be a problem. That's a stopgap measure. That's why I'm sitting there saying, why can't we need to be looking at areas where we can improve efficiency, where we can, reduce costs on stuff. And, that needs to be a priority on there. And obviously, increasing enrollment is a big priority, but in the meantime, since, you can only, when you have a limited amount of kids in an area,
Right.
It's not like we can go pick up a busload from Sierra Vista and say, yeah, now you live in Douglas, But, I mean, we
And all-
have to come up with some way.
Solutions.
Yeah,
Solutions
alternate
moving forward.
solutions.
And, Mr. Blake, DA, our teachers, I'm all about committees and calling parents and having forums. While we say our parents will be involved in Ida, you are one person that knows it's a community problem. When you have forums and you have meetings, our PTSOs, people do not show up. Our parents, our community do not show up. So I will have a forum, moving forward, and be part of solution. I can't come up with all the solutions, so I'm all
Right.
about coming to a table and looking at
Getting
others.
people to bring solutions. And just to kind of, because I'd like a little bit of clarification on something Mr. Brain said. If we did table this, does that mean that the teachers are going to lose their insurance, or that they won't be able to fund the insurance until we do come up with a problem?
we-
Because it sounded that way, that
No.
if we don't make the decision, then it's going to be costing, possibly costing the teachers insurance.
It could be tabled, absolutely. But let me tell you what the ramifications are that would be. First of all, she's going to talk about letting contracts tonight, and the board's gonna vote on that. A lot of what the discretion that goes through the mind of a potential hiree, if, notwithstanding the contracts, but others, what kind of benefits does the district have? That's number one. That has been a major selling point for this district, the insurance. If we do that, and it gets tabled, she's gonna let the contracts, they've only got X amount of days to turn them back in.
15.
That's gonna be floating about the insurance, so it's in our best interest for the total district to get this thing settled. Now, tabling could also cause, again, it could cause confusion, disruption. They're solid with the numbers. They're solid legally. And again, the amount of money that he's tapping from those other resources are only gonna be a one-time deal, because that's rainy day money. And that's the reason when we had that serious discussion this morning, that we decided to do it, because it was in the best interest of our staff. Okay, so I hope that partially answers your question. Now, if you want to add to that, that's fine.
No, that's fine. It
Okay.
doesn't mean that they won't have insurance. We have the open enrollment time period where there are changes made by employees is May. So we have a month to make those changes. So if you come back
Okay.
next week, for example, we'd still have time.
Ms. Salchow.
Okay, hearing that you're going to use MIPS to cover this, and that it's a Band-Aid. It's just a very expensive Band-Aid. MIPS is funded by Medicaid, correct? So if the DOE, well, it's being dismantled, and if Congress decides to do something regarding Medicaid, how will this affect this? What if they come in and say, we're gonna cut your MIPS by half?
What the money's,
What will the effect be? Will it come back and then we won't be able to afford this for our employees?
no, they cannot come and take away what we already have.
Okay,
what
so
I'm
we already
counting on
have
is
that.
money that we already have, correct?
Okay, all right. That's one thing I wanted to know. And also with the other funding sources that we're going to be using, what will that affect? And regarding operational and our students?
It shouldn't impact anything because like I said, these are funds that are not directly related to enrollment and is not from the MNO. The main reason for these funds, like Mr. Boren says, is a rainy day. When we have an emergency, when we have situations like now where we're on a freeze, but we still have to purchase things that are necessary for our students to be in the classroom, that's where we tap those funds. And again, they're on a healthy financial position, those funds. And like I explained, the other one is the constant monthly influx of money from the rental of that. Now, we know that we have that potential sale happening at the end of this calendar year.
That's right.
So that's another amount of money that is gonna come. But again, it's still a big if, but in the meantime, we're getting that
Okay.
money coming on a monthly basis.
Okay, transportation. Do we still get reimbursed for part of our transportation? Isn't there a formula?
There's a formula, and yes, we get the max because of all the miles we cover.
Okay.
So there's an allocation, I can tell you, I don't have the exact amount, but it's $550,000, I will say, that's the max that any district can get. So we do get that
Okay.
from the state.
I just want to know if that had changed in any kind of way. I don't know what the formula is, and I'm not going to ask you. Okay. We keep talking about enrollment because all this is based on enrollment, and we keep coming back to this. With the resignations, and we've said we have a hiring freeze. With these resignations that I've seen on the information, my background here, and we saw it on last Thursday. Then what about more resignations? Those are anticipated areas that people will not be returning, that we've already heard. If there are more, if there are classified people as well as, are certified, will that hiring freeze still remain?
So the hiring freeze that we have now, we implemented until the end of this fiscal year. And we said we would not be hiring for any position that was not absolutely necessary. So if and when some of these positions that we do have people that left and we didn't hire, I will give you an example. In the proposed cuts are 2 IT help desk for the IT department, right? In addition to, he had another vacancy that another employee left. So we didn't hire for that one. And we told Mr. Durazo, let's wait and see, and then look at it in July. Can you operate without that person? Yes, for now. With the loss of these 2 that I'm proposing, because in conversations and I guess sentiment of the board, it was, well, if they were ESSER funded and you brought them over to the M&O, those are the first that gotta go. So that's where the 2 positions came about, which affects 2 employees, okay? So to answer your question, if there are additional vacancies and people resign, let's say teachers end up not signing their contract.
Exactly, because it's
We're gonna
normal.
we're gonna look at that school's enrollment. What does that grade level, affect in terms of enrollment before we even make a decision? I don't want to impact students like Ms. Moreno said, because ultimately, if you don't have a teacher, or if you have a teacher with 40 kids, it's going to impact the kids' learning, and we don't want to do that. So with any new resignation, we're going to evaluate the position, the need of the position, versus do we just want a body in there? And then I would come back at any point and say, and even in the positions that we shared with you, and that is all based on numbers. As far as certified teacher positions, it's all based on the enrollment that the teachers have at their sites, and with principal recommendations say, I don't need these 3 additional math teachers because our class sizes are so low, so I can collapse. Even then, if our enrollment, because I am already planning, there's a, the border expansion. We've heard charter schools the online schools are closing. So we are considering, we don't want to go down so far that if we get an increased enrollment, we're having to hire 20, additional subs when we had teachers. And in my recommendation, when we get to that, if the board decides to table, I can certainly go back to the drawing board and say, because right now we are not, the only 2 people that are being affected under that premise are the 2 IT help desk technicians, as far as people are concerned. What I'm proposing, and then the 5 IAs out of the grant, okay? Because we're trying to restructure what we use those grant funds for those 3 positions. So in future, yes, looking at every position, looking at every operations and analyzing what our transportation costs, what our electricity costs are. Something that was brought up, and some people are texting me as we're in the meeting, has the board considered a 4-day week to cut costs? I mean, a lot of things are being mentioned, and going back to that, I will certainly, every position is going to be evaluated.
Good, and thank you. What about long-term subs? I know that we have a few. Ms. Cox, about how many do we have?
Currently in long-term positions,
Mhm.
we have about 3, maybe at the high school.
Okay, all right.
At the high school.
I know I spoke with a person the other day when I went to the schools on Monday. Okay, let me see if there was another question. I've been jotting down question. Can I make a comment without a question? We need to be, I know that you realize we need to be very careful about that. We always, and I caution you, it may be allowable to do certain things, but it's a slippery slope, as we've heard, and we received a letter on it. But being old, like I am, and an old district person, I remember in 2001, 2002, when we received the letter from the Auditor General and the Attorney General, and then a year later, our superintendent had to go and stand before them and basically with her certificate on the line, agree that she would get us out of financial situations. And we did, because we do. We are Douglas.
Yes.
We are fighters. We are Douglas. But more than that, one thing that a lot of people don't understand is that put a big magnifying glass on everything we did. Every granting position, every financial thing. I would not be surprised if it's still where we would hear other districts and speak to other districts. Oh, well, we don't have to approve that. We don't, what? What are you talking about? And I'm like, we are under the microscope there. And we don't want to go there. We need to avoid it because it was the scariest time in my career. That's just
Agree.
what I have to say.
Mr. Lindeman.
I don't have anything further.
Mr. Ramos?
No, I just wanted to comment further on the enrollment decline. And I want to mention, being involved in the community with the athletic, not the athletic department, but youth programs, sports programs, for 50 years. From 1982 on up to now. The point is that I have found out, not only through that and through being with nonprofit organizations, that the community here in Douglas is very vocal, what they don't want, but when it comes, when you ask them, come and help, come together, we'll unite, and let's do what's best for our community, you only get 10% of the people. But you get the other 90% that only sees the bad. And I've gone through that for many years. We want to do something, we all have to work together, the board, administration, and you, the teachers, to go out and find the people that are not coming, not leave it up just to administration, but you, the teachers, and us, the board, also have got to go and see how we can produce more kids coming back to our schools. Find out what's the reason, as it was mentioned, and try and do something about it, but all united. Because here, we're trying to do what's best for the district, the students, and our staff.
Anybody else, members of the board, any afterthoughts? Before I call for the vote, anything you want to add?
No, sir.
I would, Mr.
Go
Green,
ahead.
if, I just want everybody to know that this has been very difficult. You know, seeing ourselves in this situation has been very, very difficult. And we work for everyone in the district, everyone. And so with the positions, I want everybody to understand that we're not eliminating people if we don't have to. The list that you see are positions that weren't filled. Those were the positions we were lucky enough to be able to remove. I'm looking at possibly needing to hire more teachers because I don't know how many people will return. This has been very difficult. And so we want to do the very best we can for all of our employees. And it's not a teacher versus, or certified versus classified. This is all of us. It's impacting all of our district. We're working hard on enrollment. I know Mrs. Selchow asked about parent liaisons, and so we still have our parent liaisons who go out and call and do home visits. There have been many things that have contributed to the enrollment. People moving out of town, of course, because we don't have very many jobs. The guardianship was a hard one, and we knew that that was going to happen. But I just want everybody to know that we are working together. It's not an us versus them. We work together. And so whatever we can do for all of our employees, we're going to do the very best we can. And I feel very passionate about this is our community. These are our people. These are our kids. And so I just want you to understand that this has been a difficult situation for all of us. And we're working very hard to making sure that everybody is okay. That's all.
Thank you. So the question on the table is the 90-10 insurance for at least one more year for all the employees. All right, that's your motion, Mr. Lindeman?
Yes, yes, it is.
Roll call.
Mr. Smith?
I believe they should be tabled, so I'm going to vote no.
Ms. Elcha?
Yes.
Mr. Lindeman?
Yes.
Mr. Ramos?
Yes.
Mr. Brain?
Yes. Thank you very much, board members, and thank you, staff members, for all you put into this. And hopefully the staff will rest a little easier now. And but they still have to consider that next year they may be looking at other options, and it maybe we'll get lucky and maybe we can sustain it. But Mr. Smith, I want you to know that as far as sustaining it, unless we get some unexpected funds or whatever, it's going to be very difficult to continue to take that money out of those two funds that you asked about, all right?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so now we're going to move to item A, excuse me, the item that we moved up in front is going to now be F. So let's just move on to discussion action on the approval of certified hire. Ms. Amaniego.
Did we move that? Didn't we
That
move
was
that?
to F. So
That
we have
one
to
you
go to
moved
B.
over to F. So A, you moved over to F?
No, we
No?
moved F already, it was,
Okay.
so we're doing A.
Okay. All right, okay. So the recommendation, as you all know, Board, Mrs. Herrera is retiring at the end of June 30th. This recommendation, I had the position posted since she resigned, and this recommendation is to oversee the curriculum and federal programs, which is an absolute necessary position. This is not for this year. It is for fiscal year 25-26. And the reason I'm bringing it over now is that I need to have those two people do some cross-training in the months of May and June, and Ms. Corey Moen will not start until July of 2025.
Get an entertain motion?
I move to approve the certified hire.
Second,
Second.
by Ms. Salchow. Members of the board, any discussion? You had backup information?
Yes.
On that? Roll call.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Salcha?
Yes.
Mr. Lindemann?
Yes.
Mr. Ramos?
Yes,
Mr. Breen?
Yes, item B, discussion action on approval of classified resignation. Ms. Samaniego.
As presented, Mr. Robert Rodriguez is resigning effective April 9th. That, as you all know, he's our transportation supervisor. He did give us his 2-week notice, and he's been a longtime employee who's served in different capacities from security, at different sites, to then the warehouse, and then last but not least, the supervisory role overseeing all of our transportation. So this is going to be a difficult time because I'm not going to have somebody that's overseeing that department. So we have a plan between the three of us and meeting with the admin secretary, but it was with a little sadness that Robert is leaving, but he is leaving for personal reasons and opening up a business, food truck business, in the near future, and he needs time to focus on that, and that's why he's resigning.
Mr. Rodriguez has served the district exceptionally well in a very, very key position, and so we'll accept that resignation with regrets. I'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve the classified resignation.
Second?
Second.
By Mr. Smith. Any further discussion? Members of the board?
I just want to say, or reiterate you said, Mr. Rodriguez has served us well. I've worked with him off and on, and I appreciate all he's done, and good luck in the future.
Roll call.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Salcha?
Yes.
Mr. Lindemann?
Yes.
Mr. Ramos?
yes,
Mr. Breen?
Yes. Item C, discussion action on the approval of classified transfer, Ms. Samaniego.
We recently had a vacancy in the business department, and that's the purchasing specialist. And the purchasing specialist is such a key, important position in our business operations. So I need that position. And Priscilla Gracia, who's the secretary in the food service department and has been an employee for quite some time, submitted a letter of interest, met with business office, and it is my recommendation to transfer her from that position to the purchasing specialist in the business department.
Mr. Lindemann,
I move to approve the classified transfer.
is there a second?
Second.
By Ms. Salchow. Discussion, members of the board? Roll call.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Salcha?
Yes.
Mr. Lindemann?
Yes.
Mr. Ramos?
yes,
Mr. Breen?
Yes, item D, discussion action on the approval of new elementary assistant principal position and job description. Ms. Samaniego.
Yes, as discussed in the work study session and from with direction from the board, we have, again, the elephant in the room, low enrollment at Ferris. And it was direction to look at the enrollment and really look at the maintenance and operations cost of running that school and with the administrative cost. It's not a huge cost savings, but Mr. Fernando Morales will be assigned to cover and supervise and be the principal for both Ferris and Joe Carlson, with no additional money being offered to Mr. Morales. I want to make sure that is on the record. And the recommendation is to approve the middle school elementary assistant principal position, which will be placed on grade F administrative salary with the base salary of $70,050. So it's approving the job description and position.
Can I get a motion, Mr. Lindemann?
Move to approve the new elementary assistant principal position and job description.
Second?
Second.
By Mr. Smith. Any discussion, any further discussion? Administration? Members of the board, any questions regarding that position or the job description? Roll call.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Alcha?
Yes.
Mr. Lindemann?
Yes.
Mr. Ramos?
Yes.
Mr. Brain?
Yes, item E, discussion action on the approval of certified contract renewals for 2025-26 school year. Ms. Samaniego.
So before you, you have all of the all of the certified, counselors and teachers. We are missing, how many staff members on this list? 4. Okay, 4 that will be presented on the April 2nd. And I want to inform all of our staff that is in a certified teaching position right now, J1, H1, ETC, everybody that's in a position right now is being offered a contract for next year. We're not letting go of anybody at the moment. So all of them will be offered a contract. It may not, for some teachers that were at the middle school because of the collapse of ELA reading and writing, it may not be at that site, but we have positions. So I wanted to set that for the record that everybody's going to be getting a contract that has good teacher performance, good evaluation, moving forward.
Mr. Leno?
I move to approve the certified contract renewals for 25-26 school year.
Second.
Second.
By Ms. Salchow. Any further additional information regarding that?
No.
Members of the board, questions, comments?
No.
Roll call.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Alcha?
Yes.
Mr. Lindemann?
Yes.
Mr. Ramos?
Yes.
Mr. Brain?
Yes. Item G, discussion action on the approval of reduction in positions due to decline in enrollment and budgetary constraints for fiscal year 2025-26. Ms. Samaniego, I think, go ahead. We've already discussed it briefly in that other item, but go ahead.
So it's the same positions that I presented to you with conversations from, mainly it's school certified positions. We have the IT department, and the other department is the maintenance department as far as classified staff. And then the CFPD grant savings with reduction and the preschool, the regular Ed Para Pro, and that includes that closure of the preschool at Clausen. Now, if this gets tabled, it doesn't do anything other than we're not filling these positions, moving forward. The IT help desk, again, are 2 people we currently have hired. And then the IAs for the safe and health and well-rounded, those are 5 IAs that have a job right now, including the teacher at preschool. So these are the same recommendations that I gave to you at the work study session, and you have the background there.
Mr. Lindemann?
I move to approve the reduction in positions due to decline in enrollment and budgetary constraints for fiscal year 2025-26.
Second.
Second.
By Ms. Salchow. Further discussion, members of the board? Staff? Administration? Roll call.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Alcha?
Yes.
Mr. Lindemann?
Yes.
Mr. Ramos?
Yes.
Mr. Brain?
Yes, item H, discussion action on the approval of reduction in workdays due to decline in enrollment and budgetary constraints for fiscal year 2025-26. Ms. Samaniego.
These are the positions for CFPD. They are funded out of grants, and the reason for the reduction in days is because as of today, the grants information cannot sustain those additional days that they work. So those are being reduced by 10 days for the coaches and school improvement specialist. On the M&O, we have a secondary curriculum coordinator who's also being reduced in the 10 additional days, and those are above and beyond their regular contract. Now, if the situation and our numbers were to be in better shape, because then I would come back and say, board, would you consider the grants can sustain the additional days they were working because they're taking a cut in pay.
Yeah.
The coaches are taking a cut in pay, and the secondary curriculum coordinator is taking a cut in pay in terms of additional days that they work.
Mr. Lindemann.
I move to approve the reduction in workdays due to decline in enrollment and budgetary constraints for fiscal year 2025-26.
Is there a second?
Second.
By Mr. Smith. Members of the board, discussion. Any questions regarding that?
Are these our only employees that will be taking a cut during this whole financial conundrum?
In terms of paycheck right now, yes.
Okay.
And the IT people that are not gonna have a job next year, and the IAs.
Any further discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Elcha?
Yes.
Mr. Lindemann?
Yes.
Mr. Ramos?
Yes.
Mr. Brain?
Yes. Board members, thank you very much for all of your time, your thought, your questions. And I think we did the right thing today, at least for one more year regarding the insurance. And it gives our staff plenty of time to think about what might happen in the future. But hopefully, we've reduced the agony that they might have had over this thing by lessening today by going 90/10 the amount that they would have to pay monthly. So with that, I'm going to entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Second,
Second.
Mr. Smith. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.